Hey everybody, it's Evan here, and I just want to take a couple minutes before we jump into this episode to let you all know about something that Cormac and I recently did that is a little different than what we normally do on the podcast, and that is that we've recorded a completely separate, standalone version of this episode with a visual component, and that's over on our YouTube channel. There will be a link to it in the show notes for this episode. It's around the same project that we visited, that we experienced ourselves when we were in Boston for the AIA conference in June. But again, a completely separate conversation with graphic elements. We're drawing on the screen. We're doing all kinds of analysis that we did here on the podcast as an audio version, but it just made a lot of sense to do it in video. And so I wanted to let you all know about that, because if you like this kind of episode, I think you're going to like that one even more, because we get even a little more nerdy and architectural about it, because we're not just trying to describe everything that we saw. We can actually show what we saw. It's called What Makes This Building Great? And again, we're going to be talking about the Yale Center for British Arts, which was done by Louis Kahn in the early 70s. So exactly what we're talking about in this episode after we get past that kind of initial banter that we're known for here on the Archispeak podcast. Anyway, I'm going to give you back to this conversation that we're going to be having here on the podcast, but also just let you know that click the link in the show notes, check it out, subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you know when those kinds of episodes come out. We do feel like they need to be separate from the audio version to really do it justice. All right, let's jump into today's conversation. Thanks. Talk to you next time.
So my wife was talking about 6 degrees of separation. She was watching something, and she knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody that knew the actress that was in the movie that she was watching.
Okay.
And I started thinking there's the 6 degrees of separations of like Kevin Bacon and things like that.
6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Yeah.
Right. So
I think we've had an episode called The 6 Degrees of Cormac Phelan.
So what's interesting is I was thinking about this, and I don't know if on that episode we actually talked about it or not. But since, I've been doing a lot of like Misesian stuff, looking at Mies and visiting Mies projects and reading about Mies, and you can sort of see it over there. There's a Mies print that was just added to the household collection of 2.
It actually is a collection if you have more than one. Yeah,
Okay,
congratulations.
then there you go. So I guess I'm like 2 degrees separated from Mies.
Okay,
Because,
how do you figure?
well, I was taught by Professor Paul Zor. Paul Zor was taught by Mies van der Rohe. That's it.
And
I mean, isn't
congratulations.
that the definition of like, the separation kind of thing? Is that,
I think that's how it works. Yeah. I mean, if you were in a movie with somebody who has been in a movie with Kevin Bacon, then
so here's the thing. So now I started thinking to myself, okay, then that means that if I'm only 2 degrees separated from Mies, then that means that I'm 3 degrees separated from Korb, Gropius, Breuer.
way less than 6.
Way less than 6. That means I'm 4 degrees separated from Peter Behrens.
So,
and just so you know, are now,
just because I do a podcast with you, and they did podcasts, right? So yeah. No, I'm curious, like in our audience, what kind of connections there are, like the one you're talking about. I bet there's some pretty incredible connections, even with individuals that I can think of right now. Yeah.
Well, I mean, so what is the separation that I know and walked around with Paul Rudolph? That's 1 degree, right?
If you met him directly, I guess so.
Met him directly, walked around, talking about architecture with him. I feel like I'm not degreed of separated from a lot of pretty famous architects.
This is the definition of making it right here. You've heard it. Heard it right here. Cormac has made it.
What do I win?
Yeah, what do you win? You probably are just on some list somewhere. It just puts you on a list.
You mean like no-fly list?
Yeah, the no-fly list, right. You're on someone's black book. Oh,
no, I was like totally just, she started talking about it, and I was just like, I wonder if there's like a 6 degrees of separation from the architects.
Yeah.
And then I'm thinking to myself, wait, then that means that I'm within 6 degrees separated from Frank Lloyd Wright. I'm
This
just
is
saying.
an incestuous. I
Um,
think what you're talking about the
no,
incestuous nature of this.
because if you think about it, Frank Lloyd Wright visited and hung out with, at least stayed in his house, Walter Gropius, remember?
Right.
And
right.
so did
Yep.
and so did Court. And so here you are. Now look how
No,
close.
here you are.
Well, no, here we are.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I'm just
Funny.
saying,
I'm just saying. That's funny.
we're pretty hot stuff.
Does this
That's
make
what
you
I'm
feel
getting at.
better? Does it make you feel better about yourself?
I mean, there's times when you sit there and question your life choices and stuff, and then when you sit back and
wallowing
and,
in
think,
the muck and the
and then
mire.
when you sit back and you think about it, it's like, you know what? It can't be all that bad. Look who you know that knew somebody that knew somebody that knew somebody that knew somebody.
Right.
Right?
Right. I said the incestuous nature, but this is the oldest profession. So I think that just goes with the, par for the course.
There's one that rivals it. And they're kind of the same.
No, that's what
Kinda
I'm
the same.
saying. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think architecture is.
However,
And
I've
probably.
always made the contention that one of them gets paid and one of them sometimes quite doesn't.
All right. What are we talking about? What are we talking? What are we really talking
What
about?
are we
this week?
really talking about today? I believe it's like a part 2 of our trip.
The next part in the series. So what project do you want to talk about? I have one in mind.
Project.
Yeah.
Project.
Yeah. Do you want to go with area or do you want to go with project?
Sure. Let's,
Dealer's choice.
it's like a roulette
Yeah.
project.
British Art Museum. That's what we're going with.
Amazing.
All right. Next project. Okay.
What else can I say? Amazing. And here's
Okay.
so
Can you
here's the
set
funny
the scene
thing.
real quick? Set the scene. Set the scene of this because this is
Can-
you're doing. You
can-
made this happen.
Can I tell you how lucky we are to actually have been able to go and see it? Because from
How
what I
lucky were we?
understand,
I'm just
Well-
ignorant here.
well, from what I understand, it had been under renovation for quite some time, and a lot of people who've tried to see it in the not too distant past, maybe within a couple of months of us seeing it, weren't able to see it because it was closed. And I'm
Okay.
like, we got lucky. They're like, oh, it's open? I'd be
good
like,
timing.
yes, yes. So set the scene. So I believe that you and I were talking last time about staying at the Breuer designed
Hotel Marcel.
the
Yes.
Hotel Marcel. Yes. And so that was all planned. That was planned because I wanted you to travel from New York to New Haven. We meet up, pick you up from the train station, and then we would basically drive from there to Boston with all intentions of stopping at Yale and driving around and taking a look at some of the amazing buildings that are there. And we drove in and decided to park, take a walk around. My wife was with
You don't
us.
have to walk around very far to experience what it was pretty cool. How there was just like all
Like everything was like
concentrated
exactly
in that
like
one
every-
area
Yeah.
that we wanted to see. Yeah, It
Yeah,
was right
so
there.
there was like the trifecta of 3 different buildings. There was the School of Architecture by Paul Rudolph. There
Who
was
you're connected to?
who I'm connected
First degree.
to. Yes,
First degree. Yeah,
exactly.
Good job.
See, there you go. Well, we're pretty hot stuff, right? Then across the street from that was the Yale Center for Art, or Art Center. I'm blanking on the name now that I have it written down, but I don't have it with me right now.
You got to find your sketchbook.
Wherever it's at. You know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking
And then
about.
catty corner to that is the
Yale
British Art.
University Art Gallery. Yale University Art Gallery.
There we go. See
We'll go with that.
the magic of the information.
I just pulled up a photo. I
Implementations.
luckily had one of the front door.
There, there you go. And so yeah, we went there. It's interesting is that what we noticed in some of those works was obviously the theme that he had started to develop in some of these later works, Exeter, British art, Salk Institute. There was this language that was being created in some of his later work.
Yeah,
And
it was developing. It was crossing the boundaries of these projects for sure.
the thing that I loved the most about that is from the second you walk in the front door. Now, I will say that the exterior is somewhat nondescript.
Pretty sterile. Yeah.
And I think it's very purposeful, very intentional that it does that, because it's not what's really on the outside. And he's even said that I've watched an interview, and if I can find that interview and find the YouTube interview that they did with him, that he basically talks about, it's about what's on the inside. It's about the art gallery. And he, even the Yale.
It's like you, Cormac.
Yes.
What really matters. It's
Wow.
not the exterior. Yeah.
That's hurtful.
What?
It's
What are
not
you
that
talking
it's
about?
not that you're wrong. It's just you point that out, and I always have to come to terms with my grotesqueness.
What?
I think that's what you're getting at.
Oh my gosh. What's the word? That's definitely the word that comes to mind
Exactly.
every time I see you. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, ooh. Talk about a face for radio.
I get it. I get a shiver. Yeah.
It's definitely a face only a mama could love.
Yeah. You're definitely right about this building, because on the outside, who would have thought that what's on the inside
Yes.
based on what's on the outside? So this is a very, I think we even kind of talked about that a little bit when we were there. It's like, well, first of all, you wouldn't know. And then
Right.
like even the entry, like the procession through the threshold into the interior, it's a deep entry to get you to the middle of the interior, which is pretty interesting. But it is just literally a recession in the front by the removal of the solid mass. So you
Right.
get this void, and it's like, oh, that's where I go in. I mean, it is pretty obvious, but at the same time, it's like, it's just such a simple move to get.
Yeah.
It's not like announcing an entry.
And if you think about it, it's very you've spot on the way that basically you take this simple rectangle and you've carved out the corner of the lower portion of it. So it's multi-story, and just that single story carve out that takes you from the sidewalk and it takes you to the front door. But it basically compresses you. It darkens you, right?
It does. Yeah. It's
And
very
then
dark. Yeah.
then you walk into that front door and you're immediately bathed with light.
Yeah, because you're in that open core. That
Exactly.
it's like this full height, 4-story tall atrium. Yeah.
4-story tall atrium, just completely clad in this beautiful wood. And, you've got the 3 squares of the skylights that just filter down light. And it goes from kind of like compression and darkness to expansion and light.
And it's the same. To me, it looks like the same teak wood that's on the exterior of the Salk is
Yes.
on the interior of this building. But on the exterior of this building, it looks like zinc paneling and concrete, right? It's really cold colors, cold materials. But then you go inside, and it's super warm, inviting. Like you said, you really are bathed in natural light, but it's also really warm because of the natural wood tone and obviously tons of light coming in through the skylights.
And he does that trick multiple times, right? Where he basically forces you into these darker, compressed spaces. So, you leave the entry vestibule, that quadruple height space. You leave that area, and then it compresses you back down. So when you go to the information desk, you're kind of compressed back down. Now you're with kind of like wrapped in very cold material, all concrete, all raw concrete. Right. You've got the choice of going to the elevators, going through into the gallery space, or then out into or is the gallery space one floor up when you walk into the gallery?
I don't have the floor plan in front of me, and I'm trying to remember, because I think we just went straight into the stairwell.
I think we were drawn into the stairwell for sure.
The stairwell is okay. So I'm looking right now. Yeah, you go through the elevator core to a set of double doors that are wide open into a cylindrically shaped, and you can see the cylinder at the back of the elevator corridor, whatever you want to call that, vestibule. So you see this beautiful shape, and with the doors wide open, and you can see the stairs inside of them. And there's natural light in there, or I'll say there's lighting there. Maybe it's not natural, but it's like it's lit inside, and it's just, if you look around the edges of the back of where that stair tower is, it's just it's a set of teak doors, but it's dark back there. So it's not like, I'm pretty sure that's private stuff that has to do with the gallery. And so it's obvious, like, go up. I mean, you just came from a space where it's like, where does all that go? I'm going there. And then immediately here's the answer of how to achieve that right off of the lobby.
But first, one thing that is, so the cylinder, the concrete cylinder, you can walk all the way around it.
Right.
It
is free from
it is completely free from the walls behind it and everything else. And of course, what does every good architect, worth their salt do? Runs their hand across it. What is the texture? What does it feel?
You touch it. Yeah.
What does it feel like? Because I believe we kind of actually ran across the street first and walked around Yale School of Architecture. Unfortunately, we couldn't get in. And I believe you were seen hugging or caressing the rough concrete. I could be wrong.
Aggregate, the coarse aggregate of the exterior of the Rudolph.
I could be wrong, but I believe there's photographs to prove it.
That if they exist, I don't have them. Maybe you do, but it's you're right. There's a pretty interesting contrast here, and because these buildings are so close in proximity, I mean, they are kind of playing off of each other in that way with texture, for sure.
And so back into the British art and running your hand across it, nobody seemed to expect how just amazingly smooth that concrete was.
I'm pretty sure the word I said was butter. Yeah, it's buttery smooth.
Yes. I believe the words I used were baby butt smooth.
Baby butt and butter.
It was smooth. I think anybody who touched it was caught off guard with the fact that it's, this cold, gray, dark concrete material, and how silky smooth it was to the touch. Just amazing.
And this is not an easy material to work with, and so you can tell how much care went into the craftsmanship of this building.
I think this, and I'm still trying to wrap my mind around how they poured this, because it is definitely something that a lot of care went into the creation of that stair tower. It is definitely something that amazing. This is where I started to kind of reminisce about something that one of my professors had told me, is that we always kind of design with circles and squares and everything else. And I remember one time that somebody had done an arcing corridor where it was a round wall, basically a cylindrical wall, then wrapped with basically an arching wall of the same kind of same radius. Or same whatever. It was perfectly offset. Yeah. And one of the things that I found interesting is the professor said that, what would make it more interesting is if you offset it with a square or just a straight line. And it would actually make both of those seem differently than what they are. And that was in perfect play when we were there, because now you can actually see, I see exactly what he was talking about, and he's right.
I just want to build on that because these are basic shapes. You think about primitives in three-dimensional geometry. 3D modeling, it's like primitives, and nobody in architecture school wants to play with primitives. They want to be free form, and they want to be expressive and do all these things. So placing the cylinder in the square is what you're talking about. They kind of creates this negative space that undulates just by the nature of these two shapes being placed one inside another. So you've got these corners, and you've got this round thing playing off it, and lighting. This is where you start to get that play that you're talking about, right? The way that each one, they can be the exact same material, but they reflect light differently. They catch light differently. You've got darker corners, you've got brighter spots toward the center, and it creates this kind of procession through the space just by placement of lighting. And it's so elemental in that way, and it just seems basic, and I mean that in the most truest sense of the word. And it's so powerful also, right? And I think and it makes me just wonder if some of this stuff is just kind of hard coded into our DNA. And I don't know if I mean human or if I just mean architects, but it's those things where it's just like you can sense the powerfulness of it because of all of those things working in unity, right? Shape, color, mass, light, shadow. It's all of that stuff, and you're getting it immediately going into this building, and you haven't even gotten to the spaces that are like truly celebrated, right? Like this is seriously just utility at this point.
Right.
And it's still pretty incredible.
One of the things that I started to understand visiting this, then visiting across the street, and then later on we'll talk about another one, probably in a different episode, is his organization based off of the servant spaces and the served spaces. And, how each of them are uniquely and very distinctly separated from another, but also work in uniform to help order each other. It was simple moves, just simple moves to be able to pull that off, where we're sitting here, we've barely gotten into the building, and we're talking about the basically the elevator and stair lobby.
I know. They were total architect nerds. And
but here's the thing.
It just shows you how impactful it is.
Exactly. How simple and amazing that space was, because you talk about it. You talk about, here we have a circle and a square. So first you've entered
in
into
plan. I'm just trying to be descriptive to the audience here.
So if you imagine, here you are, you've gone into a big rectangle. As you go into that rectangle, one of the structural bays at the ground floor has been removed to create this compressed dark space. And then when you go into the space, all of the floors of the next bay in have been removed. And now it's all the way up to the skylight, to the to the roof. And all of these are just simple squares. It's just
it's one dark void to one bright, bigger void.
Right.
And then you go back into another dark, small, tight void.
And then that void is filled with...
You go to the next one. Yeah, and you've got this cylinder inside the cube, which is a void inside of a void. And then you go inside it.
And then you go into the cylinder, and what are you greeted with? A triangle. Oh, no, sorry. This was a square.
The street.
Yeah, that was across the street. Don't get my stairs confused. You're right. Don't get them confused. So here we are into a square that is
inscribed into the cylinder.
Exactly. Yeah. And you're just like, come on. Like,
I know.
Just simple moves that are just so brilliantly done.
And now, it's all like on the center axis of the building.
Yeah.
You're talking about the order of all of this. And it is so simple and freaking obvious. And yet it just goes to the root of the DNA of an architect immediately.
Exactly. And so then we walk into the stairs, to the cylinder, and the cylinder holds the stairs, and they interconnect all of the different floors. And it's amazing because, of course, that same smoothness, that same butter texture of the exterior is carried off into the interior. But here's where I turn this over to you, because here's where you basically sat in awe for 4 flights.
A lot of pictures.
Took a lot of pictures in 4 flights of looking at stairs and handrails.
Yeah, this is total stair porn central here.
Yes.
And what year was this project? Do you know offhand?
It was
70 something, right?
Yes, it was late 60s, early 70s.
Okay.
So basically the same time as when the Salk was being designed and completed. So
the guardrails, and I mean, it's all this kind of steel plate that's just raw steel plate. It's all TIG welded, like super perfectly, and it's what's really cool about the guardrail handrail system was that it was all built up out of very simple pieces of plain flat steel, plate, and bent and formed into these really nice to touch, nice to interface with shapes. I mean, so it has this really beautiful radius, different radii that you never have to worry about. Like, it's a harsh, cold material, but it is soft to the touch, right?
Yeah.
And so you have these stainless steel kind of cylindrical rails that you're grabbing, but the guardrail itself that's built up out of this plate steel, and it's probably 1/8-inch plate steel, maybe even thinner, maybe like 3/32, but it's dark. It's this cold material, but it's totally inviting to touch, and it's really lovely and complex. It's like really well done.
What's the interesting thing about that, though, is even though here it is, this cold steel, it didn't feel cold because I think because it being darker kind of helped warm that space up. And with just this, here you go, ready, the dappling of the light coming down from the top of the cylinder.
And why? Okay, yeah. So this is something that you were really nerding out over in the stair, which was the way that, okay, so it's a square in plan. The stairs are square, and you're inside of a cylinder, so it's scribed in,
Right.
but it only touches at those corners, right? And so the stairs themselves, the treads and the risers, the whole run of stair is held off of the edge of the cylinder so that light can pass through, not just the middle of the whole stair, but along the edges of the stair as well. Because you're right, like there is this dappling of light because the lighting in there is warm, and it's at every landing going all the way up. But there's also a bunch of, I think it's a skylight at the top, like through glass block or something. We'll get there in a minute. But,
but just to let you
all
know,
of that filters all the way down to the bottom.
Exactly, yeah. What's interesting is the cylinder itself actually stops short of going all the way to the roof. And so when you're in, and I don't want to give it away, another space, you see that it stops short. But it's capped off with glass block. And then above that is the skylights.
The major
and so
skylights,
you do get that light coming through. So it's that borrowed light that then is just because of, and I know that there's certain people who may or may not listen to the show that really hate glass block. I mean, this is a magical use.
This is the way to use it. This is the way to use it.
If you're going to use it, this is the way to use it because
this is the case study.
It created such a different kind of light. It was a diffused light, but it was also kind of a very dancing, I don't want to say disco ball-esque. It wasn't like that, but it wasn't a consistent, harsh lines and all that other stuff.
It's like a caustic pattern on the bottom of a pool, right?
There you go.
Or
there you go.
Reflecting off of a pool surface onto a wall or something where it just kind of dances along like you're talking about.
Yeah.
But it's a refraction, right?
Exactly.
It's a reflection and a refraction. And then it's augmented with synthetic lighting too. So all the way down, because this is a 4-story stairwell. So and what's really interesting too is that the floor of the building is not concrete. The flooring on the first floor, at least, is terrazzo, and that terrazzo is the tread of each step and the landings going up, and so it's just like that material continues to take you upstairs. I mean, that helps warm up the stairwell, right? Because this is a totally enclosed. There's no windows to daylight. There couldn't be. It's in the middle of a building anyway, except for the skylights at the top, which we just mentioned. But it feels nice in there, even though it's this. It's a heavy space to be in. To get you to go upstairs. So it's not like the kind of space you want to hang out in, like we wanted to hang out in.
I was going to say,
normal people don't.
It took us
it took us a while to get up to the second floor.
A commonly long time to get out of a stairwell.
Yeah, I don't think your wife was in there as long as we were.
No.
But you kind of go through it, and you're just looking at every detail. It's one of those things that really encourages you. Why did they do that? Oh, that's interesting how those two things go together. And it really encourages you to kind of study it as you go up.
Yeah. And, so one of the things that, you were talking about is that I was kind of enamored with is the fact that not only equally, I think you were enamored by the fact that you've done a lot of metal work in, your handcrafting.
I love stair design. I just truly love stair design. Yeah.
And I realized, I guess through some form of osmosis, maybe I actually learned something in architecture school, but that I've copied him on stairs where there's
by holding it off, doing the hold off.
So not only did he hold the stairs off the wall, so there's a visible gap between the wall and the end of the treads. But then what he did was also hold basically the tread surface that's inside the handrail
that
or the ground.
terrazzo.
He's held that in from there. And so I remember, one of my favorite stairs that we've ever done on a project was we held it off of the wall, then held the terrazzo, the precast terrazzo treads off of it, but it was just a folding metal plate that, went down the stairs, and then the treads themselves kind of like floated inward of that. And so there was kind of this zone of like, here's like the gap between the stair and the wall, here's the gap between the handrails and the treads, and then here's the treads. And every stair,
there's a hierarchy to all of these elements. Yeah.
In every stair that we went into of every building that he did, we saw that detail. And it was beautifully executed, beautifully done. I don't know if I executed as well as he did, but I it's one of my favorite design aspects of a project that we did. But it was one of those that I look back at things that I've done on projects that are like direct result of my hand, my thought, my creation, that are very Kahn-esque. We'll talk about it a little bit more, when we talk about other things as we get in there. But it is definitely something that has been deep rooted in my education and DNA, that some of the simple moves that he's done in, to just kind of like, I swear that I would kick myself when I use this word, but
But here we go.
To juxtapose one material to another, instead of kissing them, they separate them and give some breathing room between the two. And that is just literally something that I've just thought that, it's just natural, right? That's what you do. Now granted, I had a lot of Ivy League professors that, taught me and stuff. And so they were influenced by the things that we're talking about now. And so maybe just through, them and them and them, and that starting off with that 6 degree or 2 degree or 1 degree separation between all of these people, I kind of learned these things. I don't really believe that I actually learned anything in architecture school.
You heard it here first. I think it's interesting that you're pointing this out. Yeah. You do start to see that. And I think it was already apparent. It was happening on the exterior of the building. It was happening in the lobby.
Yeah.
But in here, you really start to see it because you're right at it.
Yeah.
And you can see the literal, like, we don't allow these two materials to get too close to each other. Right. And that could be 1 inch, 2 inches, 6 inches. It depends. But you do start to see it, and here it is with the treads, and they're just holding them back from the edges of the poured-in-place concrete stair.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
Then when you finally get off of the stairs and go into some of these spaces, one of the ones, obviously, when the stairs always present you back to the main entry lobby.
Entry atrium. Yeah.
Yes. And so when you're there, you're always presented to different heights of that. And then as part of the renovations that they just did, they had to make that atrium meet code. And unfortunately, new code. And unfortunately, I know that if you have an atrium, you either have to fire separate it or you have to close it off. A lot of times you'll see people fill it in with glass so that, it's completely separated. So
Smoke separation.
Exactly. And so they went the fire curtain route. And the first thing that you come out of these stairs, or you come off of the elevator into that little small vestibule, and then you turn and you're faced back towards the big entry vestibule, the big entry atrium, you want to immediately go up and lean over and look down and all of this other stuff. And there is a security guard posted at every floor, basically getting ready to yell at you. Don't do that. Hand.
Can I talk about what I think really matters here? And it's not your nerdy smoke system. It's an orientation technique. Yes. I think what is so brilliant about this, and you mentioned it directly, which is he reorients you back to the space you came into the building from, every level that you go up. And that is all about orientation. for visitors. And this is a public building. It's not the kind of building that you're going to get to know over time and try to figure out the circulation paths. And I mean, of course, that's true for some people, but for most people, they're going to experience it one time. Yeah. And it's, again, so clean and so obvious about where you are at all times in this building for a rather large building. What's so brilliant about bringing you into a 4-story atrium is you get to see where you're going as soon as you get into the building.
Yeah.
And then to continually remind you where you've been as you move up through the layers is just chef's kiss.
Oh,
thanks, Louis.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is, and now that you say this, so you come in, you like, of course, you're just sitting there kind of like awestruck looking at this big, atrium space that's just beautifully warm. You've got the framing of the concrete structure, the held off inset wood panels that in one of the documentaries, he called it basically these, ghost reveals. So it's just the separation between a material and another material is this shadow line. And I blatantly...
Shadow play.
Yeah,
I
blatantly steal that as much as I can in the work that I do.
Right.
So
reveals, different sizes and scales,
different sizes and scales and things like. But one of the things that, until you just said it, I didn't realize, is that you are immediately informed of what kind of building you're in when you go into that atrium, because you can see all of the art. You can see hints of it. You don't see like a full piece, work or something like that, but you see hints of off into the gallery that you can see beyond. And you're like, okay, I want to go there. I want to go see that. And again, you're in this one space and you're orienting yourself to like, okay, now where do I need to go? I feel like I want to kick myself every time I say juxtaposed.
You could say contrast. Yeah.
But when you've got this,
join us
down here. When you have this
Get
circle,
off your elevated soapbox.
When you have this circle juxtaposed by this square, because you have a 4-story volume, which is the square. You have a 4-story cylinder, which is the stairs, and then you go from the atrium to the stairs, and then you again, as you said, reoriented back there. But when you're down there, first of all, the stair isn't really apparent when you walk into that first space, but the use of the building is very much apparent. You immediately see glimpses, hints of these little peekaboos of what it is that you're there to do. And then when you get up there and you kind of like reorient back towards the atrium, then you walk into the corridor and you're basically faced with a decision of walking completely in a rectangle donut.
Loop. Which is another void, which is a 3-story void now.
Exactly.
Right? And I think what's so interesting is, like you just mentioned, like, and I'm glad you did, like downstairs when you're like, where do I go? And that stair circulation is what I would call like an innie, right?
Yeah.
But then when you get up here into this other 3-story volume, the stair tower becomes an outie, and it's this object in the space.
Right.
And you immediately know what it is because you were just inside it. But from the outside, you can't. There's nothing that you can read on it that says this is a stair tower. But you already know because you've been in it.
Right.
And so what's cool again is this is an orientation technique. Now you're totally inside a building. You can't see out at all, and you're in another 3-story volume. And you're like, okay, that's how I get up to the next one. I'm going to go back to where I just was. Again, reorienting you back to this very simple diagram of circulation. But it's kind of comforting in that way because how many museums have you been in where you're just like, I'm going to be lost? Because all the time, right?
All the time.
Like none of the exhibits change. Right? Maybe they don't change here. I don't know. But I've been in so many where it's like, I don't know what floor I'm on, let alone who the artist that we're talking about here.
So one of the things that then once you come into that space, or for me, what really became very obvious was the structural grid. And like really how he organized everything basically as either solids and voids of the structural grid. And everything was ordered through where the columns were, how did you cut out? There's certain spaces where you're in, say the vestibule is one size. Then that triple height space that is opposed to that one that has the stair kind of like being the outie in that particular case is basically an extrusion of the atrium, but it's then interrupted by the circulation space and the stair. And you don't visually connect them until you're in certain locations that's actually on the backside of
you can see both of them.
that, where you can see through them and see past the cylinder and then see all the way through.
See the layers.
See that? I mean, it's
incredible. Yeah.
It is too, because did you go with me out to the one Air and Space Museum out near the Dulles Airport? Have you been?
I'm offended right now.
That you didn't, that I didn't take you to that?
Yeah, we did. Okay.
I'm
offended that you don't remember.
Come
we
on
talked
now.
about it.
How
on the podcast. How old are you?
Exactly. Like, how long have you known me? And how long have you known that I have a
You
shit
and
memory?
me and Mr. Brett Levitt went there. Yeah.
Okay, but do you? Okay, so yeah, that's right. Now it's all coming back to me. But
Just
do you
had to jog your
remember
memory. Yeah.
that kind of like
That
visual
first,
layer
when you just walk
that's
in the
right.
door?
Hey, you
boom,
completely,
boom.
yeah, totally. I forgot about the whole, like, SR-71 and our, jaws dropping and a little bit of drool on her, lots of drool. But I mean, that visual layering of that,
Right.
I think, is probably one of the most successful moves in a museum. And it literally is that kind of like visual layering at the British Art that, depending on where you're standing, you either see one piece, another piece, or all of the pieces. And I thought that was just a brilliant move.
For me, it just keeps going back to orientation. Like, it's so easy to understand the architecture and the procession of spaces throughout this building. That simplicity has got to be difficult to achieve. And yet the way it's presented is just, it's like obvious. Like, this is how you do it. For this kind of a museum. I'm not saying that this would work everywhere, but it's just, it's pretty incredible.
Well, what's interesting about it is that it gave, because now that I started to then see the simple ordering of the building, then you started to see that the hierarchy was given to the art, not to the museum. That all of those simple moves were basically created and intended to be made for the artwork.
In service to,
In service to what it's there for. And you see, you've been to numerous museums where the art, the architecture is the art as much as the art is. And so there's this competition between them. And in some cases, I've seen an extraordinarily successful combat between.
It's like a collaboration on some levels, right? They're coordinated. They complement each other.
Right.
Yeah.
But then I also think sometimes, what is the architect there to serve? And in this particular case, it's clear that it's there to serve the art. And the
It wasn't clear to me because I didn't care about the art.
Well, but I mean,
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, but what was amazing about it? So here, let's just, when we got all the way to the top floor, and here you're engaged with all of these like clear story. What do we want to call them? These pyramidal kind of like clear stories that they had.
Yeah, they're kind of a prism.
Yeah.
Really beautiful, filtering the way that they filter and refract the light.
And so it doesn't filter so much intense light into the space that it overwhelms the space. It creates a nice, constant, simple glow that lights the space up, that there's like absolutely, almost in a way, no need for artificial light, with the way that the fourth floor kind of like pulls in all of this light and basically cascades it through, whether it's through the atrium spaces or, and then filter in from there, or just on that one. It is a master class on how to control natural light to basically do your bidding, because then, as this podcast is highlighted, wind me up, get me going, and I'll just start talking. I'll talk to the wall if the, if the wall is willing to listen.
I know you'll talk to the security guards about it.
I know that I'll talk to some security guards, which was interesting, is that they were very interested in it, or they were very nice and made it look like they were interested. But what I did actually find very interesting is I did notice that you and my wife like just slinked away as you saw me, like,
gabbing.
There he goes. He's talking to like,
I'm going to go see more of this building while Cormac talks to the security guard for 30 minutes. Yeah.
About the building.
I just wanted to mention, because you talked about like that cascading light. That's a great way to describe it. And I'll say, I wonder what this place is like at night. So during the day, it's amazing. And so obviously there is artificial lights in here as well. And there's a lot of different types of cans. And I mean, I think the lighting design is really well done. And I bet it feels really different at night.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And another building that you hear me talk about a lot is the Glenstone Museum in Potomac, Maryland. And what I find amazing about that one is that they do a very similar thing where they have, these light monitors that bring in a lot of daylighting. But then what's interesting about it is that they also have it very light controlled where, so if it's overcast or if it starts to dusk or whatever, the artificial lighting will actually start to slowly ramp up. So it will stay consistently that same type of light.
Like
throughout
the intensity.
The light intensity, the light color, like everything is controlled in a way that's what you feel. And
Interesting.
I kind of hope, like that something like that kind of occurs here too.
Can we go back into the stairs? Cormac?
Sure.
Well, I mean, if we go up to the fourth floor, so we just got to experience kind of this second void inside the donut, and you saw the stair, the outie of the stair that I called it, right? But it does, like you said earlier, it doesn't go all the way to the roof, so it's held short. Mm-hmm. And I think that was an interesting choice, right? But to your point earlier, it's like those prismatic skylights continue over the top of the elevator, and then in the cap of the cylinder are those glass blocks that we talked about, and they are placed in the top of the cylinder in another square that's been scribed into the lid, and it's 45 degrees off of the orientation of the stairs. So it creates this really cool, like you talked about, like that dappled light effect, and that those caustic patterns are literally printed on the walls. Because you are at the lid of the cylinder when you get up to the fourth floor. You're not at the lid of the building, which is probably 10 feet or 8 feet higher. It's held short on purpose, again, to kind of compress you before you move out into the space, again, oriented now at the top of the entry void that you came into the building, which is really cool to experience it on all those different levels. And the prisms of glass over that entry void were different than they are on the inner void. They are more clear because there's no artwork directly in that entry void. So the light that comes through those is like literal skylight lighting. But back in the inner void, I don't know what else to call these things. It's much more prismatic and filtered because that's where the art is, and it has to be protected from the UV. So such a different experience in all of these spaces from the skylighting, which is so cool, but it's right there, and it's this really simple move that has a really dramatic, deep effect on you as you're kind of elevating through the building, getting closer and closer to the light, which is at the top. And here you just kind of get to feel it. So it's like this spatial compression, but the lighting is at its most intense, which I think is kind of an interesting contrast as you get to the top of the stairwell. So thanks for obliging me getting back into the stairs here.
Yeah. So I do have one question real quick. I guess if kidnapped you is the right word, because like you were like, yeah, man, why do I have to like kind of go out of my way, take a train? Can't you just come pick me up and let's go there?
I don't want to go to Yale, man.
But would you say if this is on anyone's bucket list that this is something that they have to see?
Only if you can get inside, but yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And this is what I drew this contrast when we were there, because you haven't been to the Salk yet, right?
No.
I mean, you're a loser. But
I know.
You don't have to get to the inside of the Salk. Like, of course, you want to get in the courtyard of the Salk, but the actual inside of the Salk is not
utilitarian.
Project is about.
It is a lab building.
You've got to get to the inside of this because this is the courtyard of the Salk, but in a completely different way.
So the British Arts and the Salk were basically the last two projects, and from everything, they basically are the opposite of each other. Mm-hmm. One is very much an exterior exercise of space making of the exterior place, right? the courtyard and the arrangement of the buildings and everything else. I mean, yes, it is also designed for being a lab building and a research facility and things like that. But I think everybody always talks about this is his masterpiece of exterior. And vice versa, I think for me, the British Arts was definitely one of his masterpieces for interior. Now,
what is so similar about them is that we're talking about the public spaces and how similar they are, even though one's outside and one's inside.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the Salk is locked off now with fences. I don't know that it was always like that. And so the Salk is not a public building by any means. It's a private research facility. And they've upgraded security over the years. But I'm pretty sure that courtyard was open back in the day, as it were. And I think what's so interesting about what Kahn did in both of these projects is like he really is kind of commanding the environment. At the Salk, you've got this trough that runs down the center of the courtyard, and on that one day of the year when the sun sets and it's aligned with the trough, and it's just this glorious experience. And in this space, it's a completely different function, but he's still commanding the light as it enters this building, and the way that the building interacts with this much, much larger idea of the environment, I think is what makes these both so successful. And it is interesting that they're both happening at the same time, and there are very close similarities, and there are very big differences at the same time. Obviously, two completely different projects, but you can see in the mind how there is this culmination of his work coming together in very different ways, but in these projects that do seem linked in a very tangible way.
You definitely see an interesting evolution of an idea and how he plays it out through a multitude of different buildings, trying out these ideas, like the simple way he treated the stairs and all of the different ways the buildings that we went to had similar ideas but different executions of a stair.
Yeah, I think it's like different expressions of it's like genes in a human. And different one through epigenetics are turned on and off, and then you have this different expression. It could be eye color, it could be hair, it could be all these different things, but it's like the genes are there, right? All the chromosomes are there. And you see that in the DNA of these buildings, and it's a slight change, different expression. So cool. So cool to see that.
I will say this, you kind of harassed me about me having these long conversations with the security guards and stuff. But one of the things here we are.
Cute. It was really cute.
We're in the main gallery. It's the 3-story volume where all of the galleries look into this 3-story volume. And so you can have all sorts of different views and perspectives of this space with now the Audi of the cylinder of the stair occupying a good portion of this. And first you think to yourself, well, why would you waste quite a bit of space in this gallery space, in this main gallery space to a stair? But to be quite honest with you, in my opinion, it somewhat softens the overall space, the austerity of this big,
like the rigidity of the structure and the grid and all of those things. Yeah.
And then as you look at the volume of the stair, it's punctuated by windows. At the bottom, when you enter into the gallery, it's doors. And then every floor above, it's stairs that basically just kind of like replicate the doors, this kind of like entry. So there's almost like the stair volume itself is separated by these voids behind it that then you kind of get this kind of like different perspective depending on where you're standing. But the thing that I liked about like some of these conversations were in that particular gallery space, here we are, and we're looking around at the joints, we're looking at all these different spaces, we're looking up at the thing.
We're looking at how the fire department connections are hidden behind these invisible panels.
All of these different things. And I asked them, I'm like, how many times do you get people like this that are basically in there looking weirdos like us that are sitting there looking around at the building? And I had joked to him, I'm like, oh, look, there's art here kind of thing. Because it's like, I'm not, much like the Glenstone, I'm not there for the art. I'm there for the building. Right. And then he sees tons of architecture nerds looking at this building and all this other stuff. But he was sharing with us the spaces that he enjoys. He's like, oh, the best view, you got to go up to the third floor and go over here, and then you can see this and this and this. And so they're thinking about it as well, and they're thinking about it maybe in a completely different way, but also what the intent of like any architect is to have a building engage people who aren't architects. And for the building to be able to speak to him where he's got favorite spaces where the view, the light speaks to him, means that it's sort of, I guess Lou had something going there.
Successful, yeah.
It was pretty successful.
Absolutely.
And then with my subsequent conversations with two other security guards, I was talking to this kid, and he started asking me questions. He's like, well, what do you see when you're looking at this building? He's like, I see people come in all the time and they're looking at the building and all of this other stuff. And he goes like, I never really engaged them to like ask them what the hell they're looking at. Everybody else, like with families and everybody else, they're coming in to look at the art. And you get these people who come in and they're just distinctly different because they're looking at concrete, wood, light, all of these other things. And we just started talking, and he kept asking me more questions and stuff. And it was interesting to see how willing he was to engage, ask questions about how I see the building. And he was just like, I don't think that I'm ever going to be able to see this building the way that I saw this building versus the way that I see it now in this conversation that I'm having with you. I'm going to see a lot of the things that you're talking about, because he goes, I've never paid attention to that stuff. He goes, none of that stuff made any sense to me. And now I guarantee you he's probably going to be sitting there if he's like just at that cross corridor where he gets to yell at people for leading into the atrium spaces and obstructing the potential fire shutters coming down. And don't want to get them
want
chopped.
to get between a fire shutter and a hard thing.
And so I was talking to him about the way the light comes in and the way the light lights this up and cascades across here, and it and you say like, I told him like, step back and look down the center of this space, and you're framed off by a gallery here and the void here, and how the light is different in those spaces and how it illuminates the artwork and stuff. And he's like looking at it, he's just like, I see it. I see what you're seeing.
Called indoctrination, Cormac.
It is. And if he goes off into architecture school, awesome. I'm your evangelist. I'm here for the day.
So when we got up to that upper floor, I wanted so the grid, is a thing in this building. Right? Yeah. It's like a three-dimensional grid. And it's really heavy at the very top, right? The structure of those concrete beams that are separating those from each other are heavy and canted. What I thought was interesting when we got to the top, and you see hints of this on the way up, because the grid kind of goes up and meets those, and these pilasters, for lack of a better term, from inside that void are skinnier than the beams that are going across.
Yeah.
But then when we got up into those upper galleries, you see the grid on the floor, because they've brought the terrazzo up just where the grid is, and then there's squares of carpet in between there, right? Yeah. And then the way that the columns go up, and these very thin concrete columns go up, and they don't quite touch the underside of those trapezoidal beams. They're held with a reveal off of it, but they're so much smaller. The footprint of the column is so much smaller than where the beams intersect. And all of that is just the scale and proportion of all these different elements and the way that they touch or don't touch. I thought it was just this incredible study that could be done about that.
That, in another building that we'll talk about in a future episode, because it's repeated again, it's one of these language where he's R&Ding these ideas that he R&Ds throughout execution of different buildings. But you see it repeating over and over again in different forms. In one, there's this exterior expression. This one, it's kind of this interior expression. And even in a way, it has an exterior one where, you've got like this heavier, wider columns, and then they slowly shrink as they go up. And you see that same thing as you're saying. When you go inside, they still shrink when they go up, that they're
Yeah.
smaller,
And
lighter,
it
thinner.
makes sense, right? Like,
Right.
because they're not holding up as much. But I
Exactly.
think it's,
Yeah.
well, how many times would you just copy paste
Oh, yeah.
to put
It's
it
just like,
in a modern
I got
3D
a,
sense,
I got a
right? It's
16.
just like,
Yeah.
yeah, they're
Right.
all instances of whatever's on the bottom floor. They get the same thing on the upper floor. Not here. Nope.
Nope.
And why not? Because they don't need to be.
It's because of the use of the atriums. You can see that you're visually connected to the one you're standing, say, behind you, and then you're looking back towards the atrium, and you can see clearly, because I think that was one of the first things you and I were talking about when we walked into the atrium space, was this kind of like descending width as it goes up.
You pointed that out. It's funny because I've never noticed that before, because it's like you're just glancing at this stuff. Okay, what's on the next page? What's on the next? I
Yeah.
want to get to the cool stuff.
Right.
But this is the study. They get thinner and then a little thinner at the
Right.
top. And the material fills that space in. Sometimes the gap, the reveal between
right.
them gets bigger. And that is
Yeah.
maintained. Like, it maintains one line while these other stepping is happening. That level of study is absolutely incredible. It's so cool to actually see it.
And that's when you say, I can sit here in this space for hours, just staring, just sketching, just
Totally.
photographing, just watching the way that the light moves across the space.
That would be a really cool thing to be able to do. I think one thing I do notice, like I'm looking at my pictures, is you do see a dark spot on the concrete at hand level. People are touching these buildings. I mean, this is not different than like the IMP, like the corner of the museum in
Yeah.
Washington, D.C., where it's
Yeah.
literally worn away because so many people
Yeah.
want to touch that sharp edge. It's like, don't touch the art, but you can touch the building.
You know,
That's
it's
cool.
funny. I got to tell you this real quick. Real quick side note. You just mentioned the IMP corner, East Gallery, National Gallery of Arts in D.C. This is the second day in a row that I've talked about that particular detail, that particular corner,
really?
that particular dirt spot.
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing. These are the things that are lasting memories of things. It's just like, why is this like, this beautiful little sharp edge? Or how the hell did he get this concrete so smooth? Or why is this descending width of things as you move up through the building and stuff? And now we're like, oh yeah, if it's just a 16 by 16 column, we're going to do that 16 by 16 column all the way up and not even think twice about it. We're just going to do it all the way up. And then you think, it's just like, well, why? To be quite honest with you, if you were working for a developer or something like that, if you like shrink it as you go up, you're actually saving them on cost of material and everything else. But they're just
Kind
like,
of.
no, actually, I can just reuse that form all the way up.
Yes,
And
yes,
that's the problem,
yes.
is like,
Efficiency. Right.
yeah. I don't think this is one of those exercises of, if Lou was just able to convince them. I don't think they had a choice. From what I
This is just
understand,
what you get.
from what I understand, the one thing that he didn't waver, they're like, Lou, I think we should do this. He's like, yeah, hey, thank you for your input. Shut up.
I'll take that into consideration. I heard a funny story about, I think it was Mel Brooks, famous movie spells and all this. He would go into the studio office and talk with the producers, and they had input for the film. And he would take in a yellow notepad, and he would write all their input down. He would get really excited about it. Oh yeah, great idea. It was like, you should do this in the movie. You should change this character. You should. Oh yeah. And he'd write it all down. And the meeting was over. He'd walk out of the room, rip out the pages, wad them up into a ball, and throw them in the trash.
There you go.
So if Lou was like that, more power to him. There was another thing that he did that we saw in a few buildings, and so I guess we can go back to your nerding out about the shutters that come down. He's a master at multi-use of what goes in the grid, right?
Yes.
He has these service bays,
Yeah.
but in this building, it's the structural grid and it's the mechanical grid.
Yep.
And somehow they're all in the same place at the same time.
And you and I were standing there staring, just like, because we saw a fire department kind of connection.
Yes.
And we're sitting there, it's like, oh, look at the way that he hid the standpipes. Because here you got something that normally you would see standpipes within the stairs, run them up through the rated stairs, and
be right there.
they'd be right there. And here he took them out of that because the stair, that's an architectural thing.
Special space.
Don't
Yeah.
put anything in here.
Right.
And the thing is that we talk about, it's just like, oh yeah, but this is the way that the code this prescriptive code. It'll talk about this and we'll do this. And this is what we have to do because that's what the code says. And I see these spaces, like I see the Apple Store in Chicago or go back to the Glenstone again. And you see, it's just like, okay, well, you need standpipes, but they put them in locations.
You need fire extinguisher
You need
cabinets.
fire extinguisher cabinets, but they conceal them in a very, very simple, beautiful, elegant way. And he does the same thing here. And it was just like, who would have thought that back in the late 60s, early 70s, here's precedence for fighting the law.
I wonder if that's original. Do you think that is original? Those metal covers over everything?
Yeah, I do. I
it
really
wasn't
do.
part of the renovation?
Because I get a book sitting behind me that I won't swing around. That it completely works.
Cool.
And actually has photographs of those.
That's pretty cool. I'm really impressed with the level of detail in which the utilities are organized.
Yes.
And so you just don't see shit all over the walls, like all these little warts. And you see the outlets are in this one zone. At the,
simple. Yeah.
It's stuff where it's like, there are these zones and this is where those things are allowed to go. And we have to figure out how to make that happen. And they did. I mean, it's super successful in service to the art.
Right.
All of this stuff literally disappears because it's well thought out and well designed, and it allows the art to stand alone and not have to have these warts detracting from it. Well, we've gone on quite a long time about this project. I hope people enjoyed this conversation. This is why we got into this profession in the first place. So if you did like it, let us know.
Yeah, please.
Hit a thumbs up on YouTube or go to archispeakpodcast.com. Click the feedback link, leave a comment on the YouTube video, hit us up on LinkedIn. We always post about the episodes on there. And more amazing architecture to come in the summer of Archispeak going to the AIA conference.
Yeah.
All right.
So
next time. See ya.